pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. We do have an agenda before us. If it means with the okay of the council, I would like to move agenda item number 15 to the first item of new business. So 15 would come before 14. Is that okay? Any other changes to that agenda? If not, we'll move on then to agenda item number 2. This would be consider the approval of the minutes of the work session and the regular meeting that was held on July 9th, 2019. The council does have the minutes. Are there any corrections to note?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim to approve the minutes as they have been presented. We'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And the motion passes. We'll move then to agenda item number 3. This is the first of 4 public hearings that we'll have this evening. This is a public hearing on the vacation of the utility easement in Westwood Acres, Plot 1. The public hearing that would grant the petition for the utility easement. I'll call on Director of Public Works, City Engineer Glenn Olson to conduct this public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Do we have a slide for that? A property owner has requested the relocation of a utility easement in his backyard in order to construct a separate garage in the backyard. And we had Marshall Municipal Utilities research the existing easement, the existing utility locations, and the possibility of relocating the easement. The red lines you see there are the existing easement, and the yellow crosshatched area is the proposed new easement area. We did send out notices to each of the utility companies asking them to respond to whether or not their utilities would be located in the new area. They all indicated, as far as I know, that they will be in the new, they are in the new area, and we could go ahead and vacate the red area. The only one we did not hear back from was CenturyLink, but we gave them the opportunity to respond by noon today, about a week ago, and no response was given. MMU is here as well if there are any questions that you might have concerning that. The easement, as far as I know, has already been recorded, and so we did not want to vacate the existing easement until the new easement was recorded. So at this time, that's the information I have. If there's any other members from the public who want to address.
Okay. Any questions from the council as part of the public hearing? Or any member of the audience that wishes to speak as part of the public hearing?
Move we close the public hearing.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John to close the public hearing. Discussion on that motion. If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. And the motion does pass. We'll move then to agenda item number 4, which is also related to the vacation of the utility easement in Westwood Acres Plat 1. This is the resolution that would grant the petition to vacate the utility easement. I would entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Russ, seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. Motion passes. We'll move then to agenda item number 5. This is project Z70, South High Street, South Whitney Street, with 100-200 block alley improvement. This is a public hearing on that improvement. So I once again will call on Director of Public Works, City Engineer Glenn Olson. I also make some comments. Glenn will make a short presentation as part of this. There may be public comment on this. So if we get to the point where people do want to make public comment and they're members of the audience, we'll need to have you come and use the microphone because this is live on TV. So, Glenn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This project has been kind of delayed a little bit due to some technical difficulties, we'll call them. But the project entails the area that you see on the map. It's in the alley between East College Drive and Marshall Street, the South Street. Anyway, the alley improvement project includes two different types of improvements. One is a storm sewer improvement from essentially the middle of the block south to the South Street, where there's an existing stub for storm sewer constructed under a previous project. And then the improvements to the alley itself. The petition indicated a concrete alley, and so that's what we are in the process of designing. A concrete alley with an inverted slope to convey water down the alley in the middle of the alley, so away from properties. That is the two real basic premises of the project. We intend to bid them as separate parts of the same project with the ability of going forward with just the concrete alley or just the storm sewer work or both of them together. We don't know what the costs will be, but I can talk about a little bit about how we would intend to do it. The alley improvements would be assessed 100% in accordance with our special assessment policy. The storm sewer, the concrete part of the work, the roadway part of the work would generally be assessed by the frontage of the property adjacent to it. The storm sewer work would probably be assessed by the square foot of the property that is adjacent to the project, to the entire alley as well. So that's the intent. We don't have the dollar amounts yet. We have got the design started. We'll have that done in a couple of weeks. It is our intent to, once we have it done and the approximate estimated cost, to call a public informational meeting with the landowners before the next council meeting, so that that information can be disseminated and talked about, and then it would be good for the people to be able to come to the next council meeting when we look at approving plans and specs and calling for bids. We should have a good estimate for approximate costs, and then, of course, we have to wait for the actual bids to come in. The alternatives that we would have is, at this point in the year, we may want to take a look at what the estimated costs are versus what the bid costs are. Getting into the fall, sometimes prices get higher than doing the job the next spring. Now, if we have the completion dates late enough so that they could actually do the work in the spring, if they get the project, that's something that we want to talk about as well. If we make them have it done by October 15th, there might be an increase in cost just to do that. But if we make the project completion date July 1st of next year, it may open up a whole nother group of people that are able to bid it. So that's the kind of stuff we want to talk about before we actually put it out to bid. I think that's all I can say at this time for the construction of it and the cost of it. It's one of those things where we're going to design it. We're required to design it in accordance with the petition. And so that's how we're designing it. That's what you'll get at our next informational meeting for potential cost. If you have any questions, I'd certainly take them.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. I'll open up for any input for the public as part of the public hearing. Anyone wishes to speak as part of this project? Any questions that the council has?
I just have a quick question. I was looking through this earlier today, and this starts with a petition from owners that have not less than 35% of the frontage of the real property, correct?
The
It starts
initial
with-
one was, but that's the petition that had the wrong signatures and things. That's why it was redone, and now I think it was like 60%.
Well,
The-
one-
I thought it was 73.
Yeah, it was, we lost the person too, and we didn't think that was a consideration because of the amount of people that did sign.
Well, one of the questions I had when I was looking at the petition here is, in a number of these parcels, they have joint ownership. We have two owners, a husband and wife usually. And on some of these petitions, I see, even though it's a husband and wife, there's just one signature. And so I'm just wondering,
Which petition are you looking at, Glenn? Because this one went back, the one that was approved June 25th required joint owners to sign. So you have to be looking at the correct petition that was submitted.
well, I'm looking at the one that was sent in our packet, so.
Yeah, I think that's the wrong one.
Okay, that's what was my concern, because it looked like if we should be reminding people that we need two signatures and so forth, and like I said, what I had in the packet was just one, so it's been corrected then.
And the council has passed on it. You have determined that there was a sufficient
Right.
amount of property submitted to meet the 35% requirement. Yes.
And it's not necessarily based on number of owners, but on frontage foot too.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that point. Thank you.
Any other input as part of the public hearing? Yes. If you could also, for the record, give your name and address.
Absolutely. Kevin Velheisen, 103 South High Street. I just have a couple of questions. In this hearing here, are you wanting to know specifically what direction we as the neighbors want you to go? Or I'm curious, first of all, what are you hoping to hear from us? We didn't know that this wasn't the hearing that we needed to be at to kind of cast our vote necessarily. Is that what this hearing is for us to all come together and say which way you want us to go?
Right, and Glenn can comment on this more, but we have the petition, and then we've accepted the petition.
Yep.
And now, with the public process, it's required to have a public hearing to
Okay.
discuss the merits of the project that have been requested by the petitioner.
Okay.
So it's really not about the process, but it's about the
Okay.
project. Glenn, anything more?
No, it's about the actual request that was made, and we intend to follow that request.
Okay.
And so if there's any feeling by 35% or more of the property owners that that's not what they want to do, then we should discuss that.
Because, Kevin,
Okay.
the next action after the hearing is done is the council needs to take action on whether or not to go the next step, and that is
Okay.
to advertise for bids for the project.
So if 30% of the property owners are against an element of this, then the project won't proceed? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
No, that's
Yes,
not-
because he said 30% don't like it, it would not proceed. That's not true.
That's not, the law's at 35%
Approve.
approved.
That's correct.
So,
But the important part here is what information would you like to give to comply with what you believe should be done on the project?
Sure.
That's what we're here to
okay.
discuss.
There are a number of us who signed the petition because we wanted to be good neighbors and have this discussion, and we wanted to help our neighbors with the drainage problem that they are having. But we also feel we were a bit blindsided by the addition of the concrete to the proposal, especially when you consider that only 3 homes on High Street actually have alley access. The rest of us have absolutely no use of the alley other than that's where our garbage cans go. And so concrete would be lovely to prevent us from our shoes getting muddy a few times a year when we're bringing our garbage out. Other than that, there's absolutely no use of the concrete out there. And so at least as speaking to, for myself and my wife, we are very against the addition of the concrete, especially with the frontage cost, which would cost us $8,600 based on at least the estimate that was in the paper, that $75,000 of it might be assessed to the homeowner. If it's more the 106, then obviously that's going to be a lot higher. And so, because we happen to sit on a 75-foot lot, and so I am speaking against that. Also, in the Marshall Independent, March 13th, when an article about special assessments and the decisions you made, there was a comment in here that said, I should have, legally, special assessments for city improvement projects can't be more than the amount of the benefit a property receives from it. Could any of you speak to that?
And that's a correct statement, yes. Special assessments can be assessed only an amount that the property improves in value based upon the assessment or the work that's done to improve that.
Okay. So if our property in no way values from this,
And that's always the big rub. How much does a new alleyway improve the value of your property?
that's correct. From a resale standpoint, we know it does not. From a
You don't have a
property-
new alley, you don't know whether it improves it or not.
Well, in my conversations with realtors, it does not. It may increase our taxable value. So I was just wanting to know how that would also be factored into this. Because again, $8,600 for a concrete alley that we would receive no benefit from. I'm curious how that would be reconciled. So, thank you.
I guess related to that is the idea that, you know, we've been discussing the special assessment policy recently, and one of the provisions there is that you would be assessed for the front of your house, but if they had a street on the side of your house, you wouldn't be assessed for that, correct?
Correct.
But these people will not only be assessed for the front of their house, but also the back of their house if they're assessed for an alley. Is that correct?
Correct.
It seems inconsistent in a policy, though, doesn't it?
Well, alleys have historically been assessed differently than street costs. And that's, I'll just leave it at that.
Other input? Anyone else wish to speak? Dan?
Hello, Council. Dan Ritter, 109 High Street. First of all, I'd really like to see people that are here for it or against it come up and state your case, because I think that's what we all need to do. I've been in my house for 42 years. My access to my garage is from High Street, not in the alley. And I'm for this project 100%. With the drainage and the concrete. But I got a question, Glenn. Is there some participation from the Surface Water Management Fund for any of the drainage pipes or anything?
There isn't at this time. However, once a system is put in, 100% of the maintenance and replacement
Okay.
is out of that
Okay,
fund.
That's what I was wondering, so.
So initial construction costs are not. O&M and replacement are.
Okay. So how many accesses are not in the alley from the, like mine? Is there quite a few?
As far as
Alley access?
alley
Right.
access, I'm not aware of it yet. We're just starting the design now.
Okay.
And everyone else would know if they do or not.
Yeah, I would just hope that people would
Yep.
come up and just tell the council their
Yep.
feelings and,
Yep,
yeah. Thank you.
thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak?
Good afternoon, Council. Adam Riggy, 101 South High Street. I kind of echo Kevin's from previously, what he and I had talked offline a little bit about what this project would mean to us. You know, my end of the street on the north side does not typically contribute to the drainage issue, and also granted, everybody has alley access through trash or utilities or whatever, but, you know, we chose to, when putting in the garage that we are currently working on, go off of High Street. It just made the most sense for us. So, you know, being that the concrete will be assessed on square frontage, from what I understood, you know, having one of the longest lots or properties on the alley, and receiving probably some of the least benefit from the project. So that's my concern.
Good evening, Council. Andy Dahlman, 200 South Whitney. I myself live on one of the lower lots of the entire block. And so I am completely in favor of this. Obviously, one of the initiatives or initiators of this project. The biggest issue, the biggest reason that we want concrete is to help control the water. If we just put a storm sewer in and leave our gravel, it's going to create more chaos. It's going to add gravel to the sewer system. It's going to add more issues of being able to put the water where it needs to go. We can put a drain there, but getting the water to go there is the biggest issue. And so some of us feel that by putting the concrete with the inverted crown would help control the water and put the water there. Many of us on the Whitney side of things, you know, we just really want to have, you know, when it rains, and our biggest issue is in the spring of the year, the big thaws. You know, if you look at the topography of the entire lot, entire city block, it all slopes towards the middle. It doesn't flow to one end or the other. It all kind of has to go between myself at 200, Leanne at 202, and Rich and Joe at 204. So I think the concrete's going to be not just for alley improvement, but also to control the water. And that's my personal opinion. So heavily in favor of this project.
Good evening. I'm Leanne Bicey, and I'm at 202 South Whitney. And I would like to echo what Andy said, because I have been told by Glenn that basically my garage is the lowest point. And we do have a drainage system that was installed before I purchased my house. And this summer it hasn't been able to keep up, so we have been putting sump pumps outside to pump the water from the back out to the front street. So we have been trying to control the water ourselves, and it's just not enough. So putting this pavement, or I should say the cement in, would be awesome. Just like Andy said, it directs the water where we need it to go. We don't have to cut ruts across the alleyway and have the city come through and try and fill in our holes because we've had to do something to direct the water. So I am heavily in favor of getting this project going and having it approved.
Anyone else wish to speak?
Hi there, Rich Dorman, 204 South Whitney. My wife Joanne have lived there for 21 years. As Leanne said that there's a drain tile there, let me make one point. The city did not put that drain tile in. The previous neighbor did that to try to control the flow of water. We have helped at least 4 neighbors that have moved into where Leanne is right now. When they first moved there, they're not aware of all of the runoff from the winter, from the snow and ice. And so we've actually had to assist in that or make mention of it, that would happen. Another thing that doesn't help is we have a neighbor to the north of us that tiles their drainage into the alley. And you can drive through our alley and you can see it, there's a constant flow of water. So if it's from the sump pump or if it's from roof line, whatever it is, it's all draining to the alley. So, and the potholes in the gravel are just terrible for driving through. It's like a little, it's just a course just trying to navigate through there. So I'm heavily in favor of this proposal of the cement drive.
Good afternoon, Council. Thank you. Jim Smalley, 113 South High Street. My wife and I are very much in favor of this project. A couple of points for the council who don't live in the neighborhood. This petition has come before the council before. I understand about 20 years ago to have something like this done before, but there wasn't the same neighborhood support for it. As Rich just mentioned, the city will come through every 3-4 weeks or so when Glenn gets tired of all the emails that he gets from us about divots and potholes and the runoff in the alleyway. So the city is spending quite a bit of money on manpower and gravel to go through there every so often during spring, summer, fall to try to clear that out and smooth things out again for us in the alley. So, and one last thing I wanted to make a point. I understand my neighbors on the north end of the block. One of the conversations we had at the very first public meeting was potentially a chance to adjust some of the assessment pieces. So with on the north end, those first couple, 3 houses, maybe they would be assessed less, especially on the storm sewer side of things, if that's something the council would consider. Certainly, I would be in favor of that. I understand their concerns about the full assessment on them. They don't have the same issues that we do on the south end of the block with water. So I just want to make sure that that's something that you all know, and something that maybe we could have a conversation about if the council would be agreeable to something like that, about differing assessments on a block on the same project. So, and I also do, Council Member Bear Kohler, something just as a future thing, that idea of why is alleys assessed the same as streets or along the same process. So I'd also be in favor of you all looking at that somewhere down the line too. So, thank you.
Glenn, on that point, if this project does proceed, there will be a separate assessment hearing that will happen.
Yes, there will. And there's a potential of alternative assessment procedures, understanding that there are some limitations for assessment. When it says, full assess, the property is fully assessed, well, maybe it'll be fully assessed according to the regulations.
Right. Okay. Anyone else wish to speak as part of the public hearing? Any comments from the council as part of the public hearing?
I received an email from 107 High Street that they are now, she said she's crossed her name off the petition and they are opposed to it. I believe what the email said in short was because of the concrete. The other comments I want to make on the project is concrete or gravel. I have a gravel in front of my shop and I have a storm drain in front of my shop, and it does work fine. So, I mean, if that's an option to look at. But when folks say this isn't going to value their properties, when I drive down this alley, because I live in the neighborhood, I do see a lot of sump pumps from High Street going into the alley. So that is a benefit they're going to receive, is now their water is going to disperse out of there. And I believe when you do the storm drain, Glenn, won't you run a tile that directly connects sump pumps too, like you do along new street construction?
We can offer that to every property owner that wishes to connect to it.
So then they can eliminate their sump pumps completely out of their yard, their hoses out of their yards and
Yes.
go underground. So there is some benefit for all property owners along there with that tile.
And John, you had a comment?
Yeah, just a comment going back on the concrete versus, like say, an asphalt. I think we've talked about that before. May want to address that again. First of all, it was stated in the petition to be concrete, which requires you to go that path.
Yes.
But as offering an alternative, an asphalt, is that a possibility?
yes, we will put together an estimate if it would be asphalt. So we'll do that, but that can't be in the plans that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's on account of the petition.
Correct.
The request to us
Yep.
is to look at concrete, and that's very clear. But, as far as the inverted crown with an asphalt, that's still,
It's
Difficult, but it's
more
feasible.
difficult, but it can be done.
okay, all right.
Any other input from the council, Glenn?
Right, you're convinced that drainage by itself without concrete or asphalt won't cure the problem?
I don't think anything that we do is going to cure the problem. The issue will be is it a 10-year event, a 50-year event, a 100-year event? Will I never have any more water in my garage ever again? No, that's not true. So the issue will be is we'll design it to our current standards. It will certainly be better than what it is today. And it will handle most of the events that we have. But I just don't want to be saying that this is the cure-all. Both of the items in the petition will be a benefit. Both the storm sewer, that's essentially a must if you want to get rid of some of that water in the backyards. And the alley improvements will do more than just runoff. It'll be good for access and longevity and lots of positives that a paved alley will do, concrete or asphalt. So I think both of them they don't stand by themselves, but they are individually approvable. And that's what we're going to bring forward.
Well, my concern, and the gentleman was up here before talking about the benefits, and again, under state law, the assessment cannot exceed the benefits you receive. And I can see that certain property owners are not receiving thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of benefits. And we can only assess up to the amount of the benefit. And what is not paid by the property owners, I would assume, will be paid by the city if we're going to do the project. And I feel we need to somewhat go back to the drawing board and figure out what's going to work here. We have to come up with an equitable method of assessing this for all the property owners, and a determination as to what the city should be paying with regard to this project. Because, like I said, I can't see that some property owner who's going to get assessed for the front of their street, the front of their house with a street, and then is going to get assessed for their driveway, and are going to pay thousands of dollars for that assessment for their alleyway and not get much benefit. I mean, that's in violation of state law. Again, they should only be assessed for their benefits they receive. And I would like to see us go to the drawing board on this and figure out exactly what contribution the city's going to make and what the property owners are going to end up paying, because I think that needs to be worked out.
Yeah, first of all, that will be addressed at the assessment hearing. And even before that, we will have dollar amounts to discuss. And I'll give you an example, because the person at 101 South High Street had a very good example. He not only doesn't have access from the alley to his home, some of his property, that's that steep alley coming off of Main Street. Of course, some of his property doesn't drain down to the drainage improvements. So that is really something for the special assessment hearing. We'll put the project together, we'll get the costs involved, and then we'll be doing a potential special assessment discussion. And that's all by itself. And we may have to take this to PIT or LNO or Ways and Means or someone to discuss that. But until that time comes, I don't think this is the time to discuss actual assessments.
Okay, other input as part of the public hearing?
Just one comment on that. Again, it was my understanding when we started this that I was told, in a sense, the the property owners are going to be assessed for all of it, and the city
That's what
wasn't
the
going to be
assessment
assessed.
policy says.
And I don't think that's a workable solution here. I think the city needs to contribute. And I'm glad you explained that down the road, we will look at the amount of the assessment, and the city will look at what's a fair assessment for each property owner,
Yep.
and what should be the responsibility of the city. And I think that's something that the homeowners should know, that the city will be looking at that then.
Yep.
Other input as part of the public hearing? Anyone else in the audience wish to speak? If not, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Craig to close the public hearing. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting.
It said it's
Wanna
accepted.
reopen it?
Yeah, well, yeah, I voted for it, yeah.
So we'll refresh and then revote. Close the voting. The motion passes. We'll then move then to the next agenda item, which is this project, to consider the resolution that would order the improvement and preparation of the plans for this project. Glenn, any comments about that resolution? Council, have any questions about that resolution?
Move approval of the resolution.
Second. You have to close the public hearing first, don't we? Yeah,
That's what we just did.
Well, it says public
That was that
hearing.
other vote.
So motion by Craig, seconded by Russ, for the resolution ordering the improvement and preparation of plans. Discussion on that motion. If not, we'll move to a vote on that motion. Close the voting. And the motion does pass. We'll move then to agenda item number 7, the Red Baron Arena Expo and Parking Lot Project. This will be to consider the resolution that would award the contract. Glenn?
You can see the memorandum indicates the estimate and the actual dollar amounts. In reviewing the estimate that we had, the issue that we didn't take into consideration was state wages. And as we've found in previous projects, state wages has more of an impact to the project than we realize. So I think that's something that we learn over time for our estimates, but this is what it is. It was $30-some thousand or more underneath the next bid. Let me look. It was, yeah, $50,000 under the next low bidder, so we would recommend approval of the bid from D&G Excavating in Marshall.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Questions for Glenn?
How come they have to use state wages? Is there federal or is there state money involved there?
Yes.
Okay,
There's state dollars.
okay, thank you.
Wage.
Other, good question though. Other questions or for Glenn?
Just a comment, and again, I'll go on record of stating that I'm not opposed to the parking lot addition. I'm opposed to the design, so I will be voting no.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to comment on Russ. And Russ, I appreciate that. And after we had that discussion at the previous meeting, I did a bunch of survey of new installations of parking lots around Marshall. And they have islands. And they have islands, I believe, for that same reason. If you look at like Aldi store, and a number of those put them in. Where they don't have the islands, it's helter-skelter. And so I gave a lot of consideration to that after the meeting. And you do see some chipping, from snow removal in the curbs. But I see that on the straight passes too. And so, I'm in favor of the islands and kind of organizing and structuring the parking lot. I think the 4 or 5 slots we pick up by not putting them in, we lose that in the effectiveness of separating the parking aisles.
I think the other factor, and again, Russ, I respect your opinion, the other factor is this is event driven. So all the incoming traffic will be coming at roughly the same time, and they'll be leaving at the same time, so that organization of that traffic flow is important.
And due respect, I respect other council members' opinions, but again, I had people come up to me and say exactly the opposite, Craig. I said, you know, and we're here to agree to disagree, you know.
Of course.
A parking lot is a parking lot. Why do they need all these extra things? You know, if a bus goes accidentally into this parking lot, he's gonna have to fight the islands. And, you know, I was at a wedding reception up in Minneapolis, the metro area, and a person from Marshall came up to me and said they had watched it on live TV, and he agreed with me. So, again, we're gonna agree to disagree.
Other questions? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by, motion by Craig, seconded by Jim. Discussion? If there's no discussion, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. And the motion does pass. Move then to agenda item number 8, which is the consent agenda. We'll bring the items up on the screen that are on the consent agenda this evening, and they include consider the amendments to the fund balance policy. Was that removed? Okay. Consider the approval of the contractor for the National Night Out event. Consider the resolution calling for a public hearing on the adoption of the 5-year capital improvement plan and issuance of general obligation bonds thereunder. Consider the approval of an off-sale 3.2% malt liquor and tobacco licenses for Ag Plus Cooperative operating at 401 Country Club Drive in Marshall, and then consider the approval of the bills and the project payments. So is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants removed for purposes of separate discussion? If not, I would entertain a motion.
So moved. Consent agenda.
Motion by John, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And the motion passes. Move then to agenda item number 15, and then we'll come back to agenda item number 14. Okay. So agenda item number 15 is consider the acceptance of a donation from the Carter Strong Foundation for the naming of the basketball court at Independence Park. So Sharon, why don't you introduce this? I know family's here, and Scott, you have something to say too. So Sharon, we'll start with you. And Preston is here too.
I would like Preston to come up and just do a short introduction of the donation and introduce the family representing the Carter Strong Foundation.
Thank you, Sharon, Mayor, and Council. A couple meetings ago, we brought forward the Timberwolves and U.S. Bank, Our Courts, Our Future improvements that we are awarded. This basketball court with Carter's family is kind of dated back before that, with their desire to give something back to the community for Carter's love for basketball. And we think in collaboration with this, in conjunction, that moving forward, this would be a good spot to have it, as he was a basketball fan, and they were talking about doing sport court, so everything kind of just came together. With that construction of the new court, Carter's family, Wade and Joy, would like to make a donation to the City of Marshall for some amenities to add near the area, specifically some garbage receptacles, a couple bleachers, a sign designating the court as Carter's Court, and then we did some site improvements to raise the court up. That would also help cover that cost. And with that, if there's questions for either of them, the donation would be from the Carter Strong Foundation, which they've been raising money for and wanting to give back, like I said, to the community with the court. So if there's questions, I'd try to answer them, or they can answer them. Otherwise, we're just here to accept the donation in remembrance of Carter.
No questions other than thank you.
Just have a quick question, and thank you very much for the generous donation. It's very thoughtful of you and will be appreciated. With regard to the city, I'm just wondering, do we have any kind of policy or precedent as far as naming public property for families or individuals? I'm just wondering if we have a policy in effect right now.
I don't know if we have a policy. I can think of a couple other areas that have been named, like some bike trail, and like the underpass under Highway 23, and then the bike trail across from border states. I can't say on if there's a policy or anything more to it for naming than that. But
So it's been done in the past.
Correct.
We're not setting a new precedent here.
It's like Marvin Schwann Boulevard.
We used to have a hospital named after somebody, Lewis Winter Memorial Hospital. So it was a precedent that was set way back in the 50s or 40s.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and again, I offer my thanks and sincere appreciation as well. Just a question, Preston, any problems with the Timberwolves or anything?
no,
Okay,
we checked with them and US Bank, and they're both supportive of
great,
it. So.
great.
Anyone else have any comments?
Thank you.
Thank you, Wade and Joy.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Craig. Discussion?
Are they going to be involved with the design and of the plaque and information
Yep.
on there?
We actually had a meeting during the work session with US Bank and stuff, so
Super.
yep, everyone's kind of working together to.
I know you've got great designs, but they probably have a little better.
Then when we get to the, completion, which will happen shortly,
Yep.
then we ought to have a kind of a
Dedication,
and then-
kickoff, unveiling, kind of
Pictures.
everything. That's what we were meeting about earlier today, to make that event go smoothly. So,
Your kickoff is still scheduled for?
August 15th at
Sounds a summer
4
weekend.
o'clock.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Very good. So once again, Wade and Joy, thank you.
Thank you.
We should vote on this, so we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. This passed unanimously, so. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, Sharon, do you want to accept the check for picture? Either, whoever?
Oh, you have it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll take a picture.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure you get up, from the short cuffs up.
Oh.
Also wearing shorts. You can crop it.
No, go for it.
Sharon, you're out of place. You don't have shorts on.
Okay, now we'll move to agenda item number 14. This is a presentation by of the Marshall Aquatic Center Study from the 292 Design Group. Scott Vandermillen, Director of Public Works, will introduce.
Thank you, Mayor and
Director of
Council.
Community Services, excuse me.
I wouldn't want to take one's job for any. Just a quick background of our timeline. Back in January, you authorized us to begin working with 292 Design to present an assessment study of our existing aquatic center, and then to begin discussing some schematic design of a potential pool and what an aquatic center should look like for the city of Marshall over the next 40 to 50 years. We began working with Mark Wenzel of 292 Design Group, who I'll introduce here shortly. Mark's had the opportunity to tour our facility, meet with our advisory council, as well as additional community members involved in the project. Mark will present his findings to you tonight. It's strictly information only. We wanted to be purposeful in our timeline. We want to give you about a month to digest the findings, ask Mark, myself, Preston Stensrud, our park superintendent, any questions that you might have. We have a tour scheduled for you of the facility once we drain the pool at the end of August. That was done purposefully so that you can see some of the structural challenges that we'll have and that are currently on the docket for us as we look to 2020. So with that, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Mark Wenzel from 292 Design Group.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Excuse me. I'm pleased to be here tonight to present this study. I want to make a couple preliminary comments before I jump into it. 292 Design Group, one of the things we do a lot of is do studies for communities on recreation facilities. We try to look at what a community has for programming and activities they do, what their facilities are like, and what the goals of the community are going forward. We try to use a practical sense in the work we do for the communities we work with, try to understand that community and try to work up ideas that we think are reasonable, appropriate, and not necessarily some giant grand vision that a community will never really find the opportunity to implement. So we hope you find this report reasonable and something that works well with your community. And I'm going to summarize. I think the report was sent to you on Friday. I know council members are busy and you get all this stuff given to you in the council packet. I'm not sure you've had a chance to read through it. I'm going to give you an overview of it, and then I'll try to answer any questions I can for what the information we found. And let's see, I can do it with, sorry, what? Okay. To give you a little overview of the study. We did tour the facility, examined the facility, discussed it with Preston and his crew who operate the facility to learn as much about the existing facility as we can. One of the things we found out is it has numerous deficiencies throughout. It's really not surprising. It's 50-plus years old, and a facility like that's going to have lots of issues. As we did that, we started to look at what's the appropriate response to repair or replace. That was a discussion item as we went through. How much do things cost to repair versus constructing new? So you'll hear some comments as I go through it, the report about that. And then really, if you've got a 50-year-old facility, let's talk about what the next 50 years would be like and how we can make recommendations to the city for something that might last the next 50 years and be an appropriate activity for the city of Marshall. So, as I said, the facility's in excess of 50 years old. It's generally showing its age throughout. It's not like one part has fallen apart and another part's perfect. It's really wearing out pretty evenly everywhere. Probably the best part of the building is the actual shell of the bathhouse, the exterior shell. That's not in too bad a shape, the brick and the roof structure, but the rest of it is in pretty tough shape. And really what we look at is code compliance. As far as general code compliance, it really doesn't meet much at all in code compliance. Accessibility doesn't work, exiting doesn't work, all these sort of health department regulations, it doesn't meet them. That doesn't mean that the building has got to be locked up and not usable, because you get grandfathered in with many code compliance issues. But there is one thing, ADA accessibility. You can be at any time cited for something that's not meeting the American with Disabilities Act by simply a patron saying, I can't do something here because your building doesn't meet it. And that can put you into jeopardy as far as the use of the building and can force you into some corrections. It's also difficult to operate. We heard many discussions with the staff about their workspace is inadequate. Cleaning, it's very difficult. The pool is in really difficult shape. It's leaking somewhere around 1 million gallons of water a year. And that 1 million gallons of water has to be heated and disinfected. So just losing water may not be a big deal, but remember, this is water that you spent money heating, and you spent on chemicals disinfecting, and it's leaking badly. So that's really a really high leakage for the facilities you have. So that adds to maintenance costs, taking care of the facility. There's other things. The freeze-thaw cycle is causing lots of damage to things. It's a pool in Minnesota. Freeze-thaw is its biggest enemy. Cause problems with all pools. And then, of course, right now, the customer experience is degraded. It's not what the typical patron expects in a facility today. They think something, an outdoor aquatics experience should be a greater experience than what you have today. So that certainly hurts your user counts, but also I think people's experiences is getting to be disappointing for many of the users of the facility. So I'm sure you all know this facility. I want to just point out this is the facility today. Is there a laser on here? Try this. Yeah. So, you know, there's 3 basic pools. Generally a lap pool with a little notch in it, a diving well, and this little wading pool. And they're all, as I said, fairly rough shape, and a slide. And the bathhouse is here. So typically, this, you know, sort of 1950s version of a kiddie pool doesn't have a zero depth entry, if you know what that is. It's a beach type entrance, so a little kid can just walk right in. It's 12-inch step. That's inconvenience for users, and you know, can make oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Makes a little difficult for parents with little kids to have their kids use the pool. Your lap pool is probably bigger than you need today. There's not enough activities going on in it because there's lap swimming doesn't really, I'm sorry, did I do that again? Try not to press that. And then the diving well is a substantial structure of its own. So what we looked at as far as what we think is appropriate for a pool is that it has long-term viability. This thing needs extensive improvements. You're really trying to provide enjoyable aquatic activities for everyone in a safe environment that's a safe experience. Accessibility, which is really critical, which today, as I said, you don't really meet very well. And then a facility that's efficient to operate. Certainly you want to design a facility that takes the least number of lifeguards to lifeguard safely, because that's a major expense. You want to have disinfectant systems and things like that that work cost effectively. And you want to maximize the number of bathers you can have in the facility per number of employees it takes to operate the facility. So we think that's very important. So in looking at your existing facility and seeing that it's really deficient in those several areas, code compliance, operations, accessibility, et cetera, what do? Do we repair it? And in our opinion, repairing it would be extremely expensive. The pool vessels themselves, to repair those, they've been done once already. They were recoated. All the parts and pieces of it really need to be replaced. The plumbing, fixtures, the curbs, the vessels themselves are in poor condition. So they're almost a complete rebuild. The building itself, as I said, the shell's okay, but all the interior parts really need to be replaced. And that's all block construction. It's very difficult to remodel it, so that really needs to be redone. Some of the deck space and all that stuff is in rough condition, but maybe not so expensive to repair, but that's getting bad. The equipment inside the pump house that some of it's in reasonably good condition, some of it's pretty darn old and worn out. The electrical panel, the motor center is really poor condition. That could go and be expensive. So we really think that at this point in time, the best use of the taxpayers' dollars is to replace the entire facility. We think you'll get definitely the best value for the city rather than trying to repair. So our recommendation is to build new. We're going to recommend that you build on the same site. There's no additional land cost if you build here. Now, site selection may be something you want to explore in the city. that's always a complex issue, is where's the best place to put it? In our study, it can stay right here and fit just fine and have a brand-new facility and not take up any more space than it does today. So that alleviates the idea of finding a new site or additional cost to buy a site. But there may be some sites that are the city's interested in exploring, and we certainly could look at how it works there. So this is the overall plan of the facility. If you remember the overall photo I just showed you a few minutes ago, the current bathhouses are right about here, and the pools sit about in this area. Right over here is the skateboard park, just off the picture, so it really works pretty well. We're generally recommending 2 pools, and I'll talk about the reason for that in a minute, a new bathhouse, and a new configuration that more meets the uses we see today. So I'll start with the first one here. So we're showing a 4-lane lap pool with an alcove for diving. So this simplifies the lifeguarding problem because you have one vessel that you can lifeguard easier versus 2 vessels that you had before. It also makes construction of a new pool simpler instead of having a separate diving well. But you still get to maintain that activity of diving, which when we see in a community where diving boards have been there, people hate to lose them, but it's often an issue that gets discussed at length about whether diving is something you maintain. But here you have a 3-meter board and a 1-meter board so the kids can still do diving. There's a 4-lane lap pool, which is great for, again, fitness swimming, which we see as only as a morning activity by adults that might come in at 7:30 in the morning and get their lap swimming in. But this pool becomes much more. It becomes the space for kids to play volleyball, basketball, other kinds of activities. We also see where we insert floatable devices in the middle of them. It's also great for swimming lessons, so we think these are multi-purpose pools. Absolutely important that they're multi-purpose, but this does fit the 75 feet, 25-yard, if somebody wanted to do a swim meet. It'd be, not high school big swim meet, but certainly club level swimming would work here. So that's the lap pool. We show an image of it. This is one we just completed for a private club. This happens to be a 5-lane lap pool with a diving board off to the side there. But they get a lot of use out of this for swim lessons and for recreational swimming. But yet it does do lap swimming as well. Oops, sorry. The biggest part of this is a new leisure pool. And there's several components to this leisure pool, and it is really the sort of the big splash here. I could use that term. So this portion we sort of designate as the youngest kids portion. It's a spray deck or a splash pad. There's no standing water in here. It drains right off, so it's very safe for little kids to play. But there's lots of things that squirt and spray and things like that the kids can play in. So that's what this area is for. And it eases right into this pool, which slopes down like a beach to water that's 24 to 36 inches deep. So there's all kinds of play activity that can happen in here. But kids can run from this to there. This area is a little deeper. This is meant for this is really, we're thinking of the middle school and teenagers area. Perhaps a climbing wall where they can climb and fall into the water. And activities like, again, maybe volleyball or basketball being played here, or a little deeper water and a little wilder play here than maybe what the little kids have over here. Water slide, of course. We're showing a water slide going into the water here. These indicate shade structures. We think it's very important to provide shade around pools. Mothers today or fathers are concerned about their kids getting too much sun and the heat and all that. So we actually have shade structures that overlap into the pool. And we have some pictures of kids playing in the swimming. So you see here's this shallow water. Oops, sorry, I did it again. There's some shallow water here that goes into deeper water. All kinds of different spray features and play features. We haven't designed all those in your project yet. Those are, something can be discussed at length. Beach area, of course, for parents and everyone to sunbathe. See if I can get the next one. And, just lots of different spray features. Again, you see, I want to point out the shallow water here. This one's completely no standing water, really safe for kids to play in. And actually, a space like this, by law, doesn't have to be lifeguarded. You may want to, but it can reduce the lifeguard requirements too, because there's no standing water. New bathhouse. As I said, this one sits in the location of your existing one, but is much expanded, and I got a detail here I'll blow up in a minute. You enter into the complex relatively similar to you do today, and a concession stand here that's designed to serve outside the swimming area. So if you're at the park, you're here, your family's playing at the playground here, or other things, you can come up and get a hot dog. If you're inside the aquatic center, you've paid your admission fee and you've come in, you can go up and also get served at the concession stand. I'm sorry, this is the line divider. Here, there's the fence. So if you're outside, you come up here. If you're inside here, we've made a gated area so we keep concessions confined, not all over the pool. There's some discussion between different pool operators, which is the best way to do that. But we've indicated that we would keep the food area in here. And actually, concessions can be a great profit center if you expand it from what you have today. We find we're working with the city of Eagan right now, and they're making like $200,000 a year in concession sales. I mean, they have a bigger facility, but it can be a great profit center for you, concessions. And it's popular with the patrons. Here's a blow-up of the bathhouse. A few things I want to point out is here's the entry area with a check-in. We want to have better control over how people come in, so you make sure everybody's paying. Today, the layout's a little difficult, so this works on improving that. We have basically 3 types of changing areas. Here's a men's, a family, and a women's. And you may be familiar with this, but a family changing area are individual changing rooms. There's 4 of them. That a family, a mom with a son, a dad with a daughter, etc., or someone who just needs help can have a private space to change. We have a toilet room, again, a single-use toilet room for that too. So that comes right through, very secure and safe environment for people who want to use that. We then have a men's, and if you've been in the current one, it's just one big giant open space. There's no privacy of any kind. Even the toilets aren't screened off. So now people expect more privacy in their changing in locker rooms. So we have a series of just alcoves for changing in, so you're not in one big giant room. Individual showers. There's 6 of them, individual showers, so you can shower individually. And then, of course, the requirements by state health department code for the number of toilets and sinks and stuff you need for an aquatic center. And then the women's is pretty much similar, changing areas, toilets, and individual showers. We've added a maintenance area, so this is where the staff can maintain the facility, trash room for trash that's generated that's close to the access from the road, a lifeguard room. We've given the lifeguard, although they have access to the deck, they're a little bit removed, so when they have their breaks, they can get away for the time and not always be on duty. An office, and then here's the larger expanded concessions, and we have both a concessions counter and support space behind. So that's a simple layout of the facility. We have coin-operated lockers outside on the deck, so people who do need to store things can put them there. Here's a couple images of locker rooms that we've done recently. This is out of YMCA. These are the individual ones. You see there's a glass door that's screened. They're somewhat, you want to supervise these, what's going on, but you don't, everybody needs their privacy. And then this is just a new modern locker room that people kind of expect to see that level of finish in them. So, whoops. So we've developed a building program that outlines all the square footage of every space. You can read through this at your leisure when you have time, for the amount of square footages of each of the components for the aquatics areas, for the deck areas, the building space, and the parkland development around it. We've made it a bike parking area, picnic area, things like that. I think this is just a detail of the images I showed you. I don't think I need to go through that in any detail. So here's the overall site plan. I want to make a few comments about that. We didn't go into in-depth study of the park. That wasn't really our charge in this, but there is an issue currently about how people drop off and the area right in front of the front door and how safe that is with cars kind of coming and going. So we just have made a suggestion here about exploring the idea of making a one-way parking lot loop. So cars go this way, so it's a right-handed drop-off. So if someone stops their cars dropping off kids, cars can pass by them going that way without cross-traffic. Here's the additional bike parking. I understand there's lots of kids with bikes here. There is some concern about the trail that comes up here and how that accesses it. I think that's something that has to be explored if you move ahead with some of the work we're suggesting here. We've created a picnic area and a small playground. Typically, we find when we put an aquatic center in that there's some dry play that needs to be nearby. I understand you have a new playground located right over here. So this would be a small structure just so the kid that doesn't like water so much can have a place to play. The skate park stays as it is. No changes to that. And perhaps there's some expanded parking opportunities with this. Finally, we created an image to give you an idea of what this might look like. This is, the classic artist rendering. So we're showing in front the lap pool. Here's the water slide. The leisure pool, you get an idea of what that's like. And then a revised bathhouse and back. I don't think any of these features are really critical to understand. There's a shade structure here. We're showing natural light and ventilation getting into those three changing rooms. So that helps with just natural ventilation, natural light makes it feel good. There's another shade structure over here and lots of deck space. And here's the cost. I'm sure it's critically important. So we've done a cost estimate based on the concept plan we've shown you, and I'll go through this in some detail. So getting the site ready for new means removing the old pools. There's a lot of concrete to tear out here. When you tear out these pools, a building to be removed, some walks, some deck space. So we've estimated that to prepare the site, get all that tore out and a pad ready to build at $175,000. The actual pools themselves and the pumps and the equipment to operate those pools, the water slides, et cetera, $3.3 million. It's, of course, the single most expensive part of all this at $3.3 million. The dry areas around the deck, so that's walks, fencing, I'm sorry, the fence is in a different place. Concrete walks and deck areas, the drainage system for those decks, all that sort of cost. We estimate that at about $250,000. Site improvements, we're going to do some landscaping, building those shade structures, putting a fence around the whole facility at $225,000. The new bathhouse and the pump house, we have a pool mechanical building. I didn't show you that on the slide. I missed that, but there's a building that contains all the pumps and the filtration equipment. We have that at about $1,780,000. So the total construction cost is $5,744,000 according to our estimate. That gets you all the hard things that are built. We add a contingency. This is very early in the game. A lot of the ideas are really preliminary ideas. There's a lot of discussion to happen between now and any time you might implement that. So we add a 20% contingency. That's $1,150,000. It's a big number, but we think it's important to have those kinds of protections in the discussion moving forward. We also have soft costs. FF&E, if you don't know what that term is, it's furnishings, fixtures, and equipment. Beach chairs, umbrellas, cooking equipment, all that sorts of things. Desks and chairs and lots of things like that. So that's one number. Of course, you have to pay architects and engineers to provide all the drawings, and then there's typically testing and surveys and other kinds of costs. So we estimate that at 20%. So in the end, we end up with a project cost of about $8 million. So you can see these two items add a lot. They add 40% to that cost. But it's really important not to stop here. With estimating at 5.7 million, you really have to get to project costs. So, you know, later if you decide to move forward, you're not surprised with some terrible costs. And so in summary, I'll say, we think the existing facility is in very poor condition and really needs replacement. We don't think repair is cost effective. We think you'd be spending a lot of money with a poor return on your investment. So a new facility is what we recommend. We think constructing on a new site, on the existing site, works just fine. If you choose another site, that would be fine. We think we want to create a design that really meets the leisure, recreation, and fitness for all ages in the community, something that really works for everyone. And the final item here is that it's about $8 million to implement this if you wanted to go ahead. So with that, I'll answer any questions you have or any additional information you might need.
Thank you. We'll open up for questions. One question I did have in the report, it talked about the need for the facility to be offline one season. Is that, I know it's early in the process, but is that required, or if this was moving forward, could construction start in, say, late August and open in June?
If you're willing to do a short season, let's say give up the month of August so you get August to start or half of August and be ready, maybe not be ready to open Memorial Day, I think you can get it done. But to get a full season in Memorial to Labor Day, I don't think is possible.
I would be concerned about losing one entire season.
Yeah, so you might have to do an abbreviated season, sell shortened seasonal passes. I mean, it's new, so people would be pretty excited about it. So you might want to get every bit out of it you can. There's a lot of concrete work here that needs to be done. Winter is pretty hard to do it. We just did a small facility that we were able to. We started 2 days after Labor Day, and we opened up right on time on Memorial Day, but it was very small. So if a pool contractor can get enough work done, I mean, it's a lot, it could happen, but I wanted to warn you that it's going to be difficult.
John, do you have a question?
Yeah, just relative terms, say the water area says about 13,800 square feet. To kind of give a physical view of that, how would that compare to, like, say, the YMCA, who's got a lap pool and kind of a zero entry?
I haven't been in your Y. So if the Y has a 4-lane lap pool, I don't know what it has. It would be 6? Okay. So that's going to be about the same size as the 4 plus diving well that we have in the plan, because they're all 75 feet long.
Okay.
That's uniform, so it's just a matter how wide. The leisure pool is substantially bigger. I don't know what the Y has for leisure pool, but an outdoor leisure pool, the one we're showing, I can't think of anybody that's got one indoors that big except you go to Wisconsin, right? Because it'd be probably 2 to 3 times as big, even 4 times as big as what your Y has. It'd be a lot bigger. Outdoors is just easier to do because you don't have to put a building over it, so, yeah, so.
Okay. Other questions? Not Scott, we have a tour on August 25th.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll move then to agenda item number 16, presentation of the Marshall Lyon County Library Annual Report. With us tonight is Michelle. So.
This still works? Okay. Good evening. Thank you for letting me present to you. Hopefully I won't take up too much of your time. Oh, maybe we turned it off. There we go. As you have before you, that's our 2018 annual report. As you can see, we did have many increases. in what we've been doing over the past couple of years. One of the things that we did notice that it's hard to put on something like that is we see an ever-evolving use of our space. So what we saw in 2018 and again in 2019 is we have more small casual groups coming in. So we have a couple of mom groups who meet there. We have people who are doing tutoring. We have people who come and stay, they do their work there. So we're seeing it be more of a destination, and so people are hanging around longer. Collection and computers, or technology, if you will, is still our driving services. They're the most used, and they're probably the most important to the widest breadth of our community. So we have seen increases in both of those. One thing that I've been talking about since I got here is that there is this shift from people using our computers to their own devices, but they don't have access to Wi-Fi at home maybe, or they are on the go and they don't want to go all the way home, so they come to the library. One of our busiest days for Wi-Fi is Sunday, and we're not open. So we know that it's pretty important and popular to many of our people. At the end of 2018, we had done some work, and I'll mention that in the next slide, but we had done some work with our collections to try to make it easier for people to browse. So at the end of the year, we did a survey, and what we heard just from, we had over 100 people who took the survey. What we heard from most of them is that they get most of their recommendations, if you will, from displays and book lists. So we have upped our game a little bit there. But also we hear more and more, how can I browse your collection from home? So how can I do that on the computer, or how can I find other ways to find great books? So 2019, we're working on that a little bit. And of course, we continue to collaborate with Tracy and Minnesota. Those are critical things for us to be able to do. So you'll hear me talk in the next couple of slides, but we continued our rotation of collections at all 5 buildings around Lyon County, and we're doing more pop-up libraries. So I like to always tell you a few stories that are behind the data that you see. One thing that was remarked upon by the staff is that we've seen a small surge in all types of readers, meaning those percentages where you see adults and children and teens, all of those have gone up. The previous couple of years, we've seen small surges in one area, and the others have remained somewhat flat. Adults have been fairly flat. In 2018, we actually saw a couple of percentage point increase in materials being checked out and usage. So that was kind of exciting to see that. Digital libraries, you can see, continues to be wildly popular. If we continue to have bad winters, it's going to only go up. Every time we had to close early or not open, we immediately get on social media and remind everybody, hey, 24/7, you can get this all the time. And so we daily can see those little spikes that we would see when we weren't closed. So we had a lot of people using us even though we weren't open. You'll see that increased hold placement on the annual report there. It was a 16% increase, which was about 3,000 more holds placed than last year. And I think part of the reason we saw that is we'd never told anybody how many holds we had placed. So last year on the annual report, we put that on there, and we had a lot of people say, what does this mean? So we got to explain to them, hey, you know, you can go online and have something, and it's here waiting for you. Really? You'll bring it? Yes, you can do that. So we thought that was a pretty good increase there. And then every year I say this, but it continues to be true. We, in fact, I think since I think her name's Marie Kondo, the tidying up, you know, woman on Netflix, has a credible number of people cleaning out their storage spaces and their houses, and we're recipients of a lot of that. So even though we've always gotten a lot of donations, it has sharply increased in the last year to the place where it's hard sometimes for us to keep on top of it, but it has really helped diversify our collection, and we greatly appreciate it. So a couple of our strategic responses, as you know, readers and browsers are one of our primary people that we targeted for our latest strategic plan. So in 2018, as I said, we were doing things in the collection to help the browser. So we finally finished the different genre areas. So if you love mysteries or westerns or need large print, those are all in separate areas. So it's a smaller collection to browse. And in every collection that we pulled out, it means that fiction's smaller to browse. And we've seen sharp increases across most of those, just because it's quicker and easier to find what you're looking for. And we try to get more consistent with our displays. If they're popular, we might leave them for a couple months. We weren't always very consistent in getting those things turned over. In 2018, we really created a calendar so we would keep things moving. And that has made a difference. You've heard me talk about the large print rotation with Tracy and Minnesota, and so as I said, this is our second year doing it. We're seeing both anecdotally and data sharp increases in people using those, but more than that, we thought, well, it worked with large print, what else could we try? So we're halfway through right now. We're also rotating cookbooks. So it's something that all 5 buildings had plenty of to spare, so, and the early data shows that that's being enjoyed as well. 2019, even though we're halfway through the year, we are working on these. We've always had, especially in the children's area, like puppets and puzzles to check out. We started adding, actually in 2017, a little bit of larger puzzles for adults. But in 2018, as soon as we had a few out, again, people started donating like mad. So we have something like 200 puzzles, 200 cake pans. And then we just recently branded it. We're going to call it Library of Amusements, but we're also looking at, we have money to purchase educational games and toys. So these are for all ages, so it'll go from 0 to 12 in the children's area, and then games in particular for families and all ages. Looking mostly at the more expensive toys and games and things that you can't easily get here in Marshall. So, you know, a lot of those games are 50, 60 bucks. Not everybody can afford that, or you don't play it that often, so you don't want to spend 60 bucks for, you know, the 2 times a year the kids are home and they love to play Ticket to Ride. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at purchasing there. The next one, the Dear Reader email newsletters, was in a direct response to our survey. And this is a company where they'll actually go into our catalog and create lists that people can sign up for. So let's say you're a mystery reader. Every month you'll get 5 to 10 recommended titles. You want to do that. You see something you want to read, you click on it, it'll take you right into our catalog and you can place a hold. So again, how can I browse from home? This was one of the things that we found that we could do that with. And we've increased our pop-up locations. We're doing more dates of the farmers market this year, and on Friday we'll be at Ghent for the first time at the Senex station, I believe it is there. And then we're looking, trying to get a date nailed down for Garvin, and we'll be at the Roadhouse there. So again, we're just looking for ways to get out in the county and find people where they are and provide library services. As you know, children and families are always a big target. Our major accomplishment at the end of the year, you can see, this is a picture of it, is our Little Learners Play Area. When I got here, we still had a substantial amount from people who gave when Robert Carr passed away. And we had saved it to try to find the right thing that we wanted to do. And we came up with this idea a year ago. This is a STEM and STEAM play for ages 0 to 5. So imaginative play, no computers in here. So you can see there's, starting on the right-hand side is a workbench, then there's a house and a barn, and then the other side of the L is 4 pieces of a kitchen. I'm standing in front of, when I took the picture, I couldn't get it in the picture, but we also have something they call an imagination station, and it's really a kind of a puppet stage with puppets that they can play imaginatively. But again, I try to observe all spaces, and one of the things interesting here is we have a few puppet shows, but mostly what they've used with that is they play store. So they take things out of the area and kids come by and they buy things, and that's how they've used that stage, which again, it's imagination. It's interesting how it may have one intended purpose, but they'll find another way to use it. The other big thing was a $4,500 grant from SWIFT, and we created early literacy caregiver kits. I think I talked to you last year, there are 5 major elements that help that 0 to 5 years really get language under their belts and really helps them to be pre-readers and ready to read even before they go into kindergarten. And that's talk, read, sing, play, and write. So what we did is we created 30 kits with 15 topics. So maybe the topic is colors, and in there we have an activity sheet for the caregiver that has activities for each of those 5 areas. It includes 4 or 5 books, and then it includes 2 toys or puzzles or something like that, again, for that interactive piece. But it's really to help, you see in 2019 it says the early literacy kits for families and babysitters. So we're piloting it right now with licensed daycares, because they are able to articulate to us and say, this worked, this didn't, this made sense, we need a little more here. So when we put it out for, say, grandparents who babysit, all those kids who don't get to go to a licensed daycare, we can help those adults also without, again, being very preachy about it, but it's easy. I check out this kit, it's got a little activity sheet in it, explains to me how I can do that. So even kids who are staying at home will get an opportunity to have that same early literacy experience. I think I told you last year we continue to target writers. We have a number of writers in the community. So we've just continued some of those same things in 2018. In 2019, we're looking at pivoting a little bit to this memoir project. Again, I know I've talked to you about this before. Really, we're doing things to prepare, and we're going to launch it next year. The big thing we're working on this summer is a preservation lab and digital makerspace. And so preservation lab is we will have equipment. Let's say you have all of your kids or grandkids plays and choir concerts on VHS. VHS is incredibly unstable. You're not going to be able to keep that forever, and you may not even have a VCR anymore. You'd be able to come into our preservation lab, bring that tape in, put it into a machine, and digitize it into a computer so it'll be preserved, basically. So we're looking at ways to find all the different equipment we'll need, anything from a 3.5-inch disc to VHS, cassette tapes, maybe even 8mm film. So we're looking at all slides, all kinds of things. So we hope to have that open sometime this fall, and we're continuing to do workshops. We've already done 1 memoir workshop. We're also looking at doing genealogy workshops, and then we'll really explode that next year. Really, the memoir project is trying to help us gather the stories of this community. So across Lyon County, whether they're immigrant stories, they're I remember when stories of growing up in the area. We have a lot of history books that tell us politically, socially, and even economically what happened, but we don't have these individual vignettes and stories to help create a community quilt, if you will. And so, especially next year, since it's the sesquicentennial of Lyon County, 150 years, we really want to collect stories next year. And so we're trying to get prepared for that. This is our last year of our strategic plan. It was a 3-year strategic plan. I talked to the board earlier this year and gave them 2 choices, which was 2019, we can work on finishing one plan and building the other plan, or we can take a gap year so we can really think about it. So finish up 19. 20, they decided to have a gap year. So next year we will be working on creating the next year, the next strategic plan, which will also be 3 years. And so we will, at the end of 2020, launch our new strategic plan for 2021. Really finishing up, other than what I've already mentioned, finishing up the strategic plan is really how do we serve all members of the community that we're responsible for. So how do we, especially those people in rural Lyon County and in those communities where we don't have a presence, because we only have a presence in 3 locations, plus the other 2 independent libraries. So how do we do that? Pop-ups are going to continue to be pretty important to us in how we deliver services. Pop-ups, a way to think about it is really like a mini bookmobile without the bookmobile. We don't need the physical structure. We just need, a place to go where people are gathered and might be interested in library services.
They're all focused outside of Marshall.
Farmers Market isn't, but we want to be again in Marshall where people from all over the community are coming. So actually there's quite a few in Marshall, but we're trying to target places where lots of people gather. But in 2020 it will be a lot of Lyon County because it's the Lyon County celebration. In 2022 I anticipate we'll double, triple the places we try to be in Marshall. That's the end. Any questions, comments?
Michelle, any questions?
I just have a comment. I mean, I've only been involved with Michelle for 7 months on the board, but I just...
Feels like longer? Is that what you're going to say?
No, not at all. I publicly want to say thanks to you and the job you're doing, not only at the library with your staff, but and really keeping the board informed. I know I don't bring a tenth of the information to this council, but I really appreciate everything that you do for the board.
Thank you. I appreciate the comment. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
This time I'll call for a 5-minute recess. we are on agenda item number 17. This is a request for a variance adjustment permit for Brian and Kim Sobolski. Location is 702 East Southview Drive. Jason?
Yep, thank you, Mayor. It's a request, like you said, for Brian and Kim Slobowski of Marshall for a variance adjustment permit to provide 11 parking spaces in lieu of the required 15 at their daycare facility on Southview. The owners are building an addition to their existing facility, which requires compliance with the parking regulations in the ordinance. Requirements for the daycare facilities are based on number of employees and number of kids at the facility. 1 per employee and 1 per 10 children. It would appear that 11 parking spaces can be accommodated in the front of the building near Southview Drive, so on the north side of that drawing. With just minor adjustments to what they have, they could fit that in there. Even with state requirements for outside playground area being taken into consideration, it would seem possible from city staff's standpoint that 4 additional parking stalls could be fit somewhere on the site. So that was the recommendation to the Planning Commission from city staff. At the Planning Commission meeting on July 10th, the Planning Commission made a motion to recommend approval of the variance request to the council for a reduction of parking from 15 stalls to 11. And any questions we can, and I believe Brian is here as well to answer any questions.
So, just a quick question. The 11 in the front, you know, the sidewalk kind of stops there and is taken up by the parking lot. It always has been that way. Are the 11 on the right of way where the sidewalk normally would
No,
go?
the 11 would be accommodated off of the right of way and actually leaving 10 foot of space from the right of way to comply with the ordinance.
And of those 4, and I apologize if this is something I should know, where that construction, like the rafters are, is that part of this property or not?
Nope. Do I have a light on? So the 11 stalls would be accommodated in this area generally. And then staff was of the understanding that potentially additional parking could be accommodated down here. It would require some relocating of this playground facility to the back. Or after reviewing the site, maybe an additional parking in this area. But if you accommodate it up here, then you're kind of overlooking the ordinance requirement for a 10-foot setback from the property line for required parking, because you would be encroaching into that space.
That green strip is not owned.
The property line is somewhere in here.
Right, but adjacent to them, between the street and the
Over
facility
here.
on the right, that's not owned by these people. That's a separate parcel owned by somebody else.
Okay, well then that negates that option. So then the other option, the original option of staff, was down in this area. It would be tight.
Question for Jason? Greg?
Not even so much a question, just a comment on this, is that looking at the area, and I didn't understand or didn't realize, I guess, that strip was owned by somebody not related to the business along Southview Court West, I believe is the proper term for that street. But, I mean, that's still a public street, and my personal feelings, and this doesn't have anything to do with ordinance, I absolutely respect that for the most part we need to stick to the ordinance, but there is a reason why we have the variance process. And I'm not in favor of vehicles coming and going, especially with drop-off youth for daycare that are parked and backing up. I mean, I think the fact that we utilize parking in daycares, that means that you back and turn and manipulate in a parking lot or is kind of dangerous. And I would actually be more in favor of having that drop-off be on the street and exiting out of the right of the vehicles and, you know, moving them, walking them up to the homes rather than having the parents drop off and pick up in the parking lot. That's just my personal opinion.
And I'm kind of in the same way. When you look at the requirements for daycare, 1 per 10 participants, how many of the participants drive? None. The parents drop them off, but they're not parking there. If I'm, you know, whenever I used daycare, you know, so it doesn't make sense. And anticipatory planning for this particular place, I would be all in favor like Mr. Schaefer says, you drive up, you drop the kids off and wherever they are. If you need a couple of parking spots for parents who are staying there a little bit longer, a little bit waiting, I would be all in favor of that. The problem we're going to have is that that road is going to get really busy really quick because there's going to be a new school going right there. And then we have a lot of problems if we're trying, like Mr. Schaefer says, you're backing up. Nobody's ever going to be able to get out of there. So maybe we need to plan a little bit better. So as far as variance, I'm all in favor of the variance. The numbers are negotiable for me. I mean, planning, again, people who drop kids off, 1 per 10 participants, those kids, the only thing they're driving is little playground cars.
Or their parents crazy.
Or their parents crazy, right. They're not driving, so we don't need to worry about driving. You might need 3 or 4 parking spots, which I see there's plenty of parking right on that street.
The only counter I would have to that, Steve, and this goes back, my kids went to this same facility 25 years ago, and, you didn't drop your kids off and stay in the car and let them run in from the street.
No.
You parked, and then you took your child inside, so there is a need for parking there. Now, I also agree, parking was the backing movement, the organization, it was problematic 25 years ago. My kids
I think from a staff standpoint, the judgment comes from just trying to uphold the ordinance that was put in place by council how many years ago. I would suggest that if we do not like the requirement in the ordinance, that at some point we get some direction to review that. At one point in time that was put into place and it was deemed to be a reasonable number.
Sure, yeah, and that, totally agree.
Understood, yeah.
And when we look at this, when you expand that site out and look at it, Google Earth, and take a peek, everything to the west on Southview, that's still open lot. Now, I'm not sure where the ownership is, so obviously the use of that lot could change. But looking at it right now, I mean, there's probably 300 feet of street parking that is not in conflict if it's used there, and especially because it's not somebody showing up for work, parking on the street and staying there all day. It would be mostly mobile. I think the employees of the daycare would certainly pull in and park adjacent to the building, but the drop-offs could be a lot, I think, almost safer, facilitated by just curb parking, exiting the kids out, or the daycare kids out of the right side of the vehicle into the daycare, and then the parents pull back out and leave. That way, everything is a straightforward motion instead of backing up and J-backing or whatever in the parking lot. I just think that's dangerous with kids. And that's just, again, that's my personal feeling. I respect the fact that staff has to recommend consistency with the ordinance. We have the planning commission gets to take into consideration, and then we basically go off of their recommendation. So it's pretty fair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I echo Dr. Meister's comments and dropping off and wherever. But I had a chance to visit with Brian today about this, and ideally, he would like to maybe purchase that lot to the west, but at this time, he's just not able to do that. So ideally, that's 700 East Southview Drive, where that house used to sit, it's, ideally, and he doesn't, I thank you, Dennis, for bringing that to our attention, because I was talking to Brian today, and that strip to the east, I said, it looks like it's almost 30 feet wide there, so it's, he could possibly park 1 or 2 cars there, staff parking or something, so to eliminate anything in the front. And he said, ideally, when he bought the additional lot behind the building, he wished he would have bought all of it instead of half of it. But again, that's hindsight. So I'm in favor of recommending the variance, just because I know it's a drop off. The kids are there, parents are there with their car, 10 minutes at the most, 15 at the outside, drop in, drop off, and it's an hour and a half, 2 hours in the morning, hour and a half, 2 hours in the afternoon. He did say the bus, Southwest Coaches, drops off on the corner of Woodfern and Southview Drive. Because I talked to Brian about the added traffic with the new school being built in a couple of years. Southview Drive is a busy street now, but it's going to get that much busier in a couple of years with a lot more traffic. And I don't even know how that school is going to lay out, if they're going to have one entrance and exit. I don't know that, but I think that he's expanding his business, and I think we should compliment on that.
Yeah, I attend the Planning Commission meetings, and I was at that meeting when this was discussed. And certainly this is not a matter of being nice and trying to help somebody. We need to follow the law. and we have ordinances, and we have state laws. And state law does have a practical difficulties test. And there's plenty of case law on it, and it's in, it's been referred to in the finding of facts that was provided to us. And the practical difficulties test is a three-pronged test. And the landowner, the applicant, has to meet that test. And it's up to the applicant to prove that they've met that test. That's the law. And there are three parts to it. One's a reasonable test. Another one, the second one is unique circumstances. And the third one is the essential character of the locality. And you have to look at those and look at case law and look at how those have been interpreted, what those exactly mean. And it's pointed out in the finding of facts and in case law that, and you mentioned here, economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties. It's not that it's going to cost the homeowner extra money to comply with it. That's not the consideration. It's the three-pronged test that we have to meet. And here's some quotations. A variance will not be permitted if a property owner claims that economic considerations are the cause of the practical difficulties. Another quote is, when an owner cannot comply with an ordinance due to his financial and economic stability, it is not grounds for a variance. So what we have to do here is look at the law and look at the ordinance, and we're here to enforce it. And if we don't like the law, if we think there's too many parking spaces, then we, as the legislative body, should change the ordinance. And you're right, a few minutes ago when you talked about that, if we think it's unreasonable to require that, then change it. But until we change it, that's the law. That's the way the law is presently. And with regard to the first test, the reasonable test, it says here, in general, the reasonableness standard is met when the property owner wants to use the property in a reasonable way, but cannot do so under the existing ordinance. Well, the owner can do it, and the city staff has shown that he can do it and meet the ordinance requirements. And so in my interpretation here, I don't think the homeowner has met the reasonable test here. Another one with regard to unique circumstances, it says the difficulties that the property owner faces cannot be created by him, but rather created by unique circumstances of the property. Well, if you look at the property, there is space for the additional parking. The unique characteristics of the property are not such that there's nowhere to put the parking. There are places to put the parking. And we've got professionals in our staff here that work with these ordinances all the time, and it's their professional judgment that the requirements are not met. And so the question I have for us, are we going to follow the recommendation of our staff, who has the professional expertise and knowledge in this area, and follow their recommendations and deny it or not? And I, for one, will vote to deny it because I believe that the recommendation given by staff is the correct one. And I think their interpretation of the ordinance and the law is the correct interpretation.
And we do not have a motion on the table, so there's no discussion on the motion yet. We're at the point of any additional input or questions. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I like the suggestion that Dr. Meister made concerning the drop-offs. This is the first time I've seen that small parcel. What is that parcel for? Why isn't, what is that for? It's an unbuildable parcel. It's ideal for access to this facility. And apparently, have you talked to the owner about getting access to Southview Drive?
That should be, I believe it's part of it. I don't know if there's an easement.
So you're thinking that 30-foot parcel is owned by you?
You'd have to look it up.
You know,
It previously was not. I've done the title work for a prior owner, and the local business person had retained ownership to limit access. And it had stayed like that.
That's too bad, because this, what Dr. Meister indicated, that's an ideal place for coming through from, I'll say, from Southview, turning into the property, coming up to the facility. He doesn't show the new addition to the building. But there's enough room for driveways and drop-offs to a sidewalk right there, and just put a driveway in if you don't want to do 2 or 4 different additional parking spots. But that parcel is not a buildable parcel, and I guess if he's paying, the guy's paying taxes on it, there's nothing we can do about it. But I would suggest that you try to talk to that person and have it donate to you.
And that's something that the property owner
Should do.
It's not something the city can or should do. Okay, other input, otherwise I'm ready for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I've got, in a little bit of an address to the point that Councilman Barracoler made. The Planning Commission also, I assume then that it was not a unanimous vote with their recommendation to approve the variance request.
It was unanimous.
It was unanimous. Okay. And again, looking at it, and I know what the law says, or the case law, Mr. Barracoler made that clear also, but, there are, I think at a point in time, we have to use some wisdom in drawing the picture of what happens here and thinking about what is the better outcome of this in the big picture. And I know that staff is limited and have to make their recommendation based on the law, but I look at this and I think it makes absolute sense to allow the business to proceed with the set pattern that they have right now, not trying to create some new parking pattern to put 3 additional slots in that may or may not get used. If I'm a grandparent and I'm taking my grandkids there and I have to use 3 slots to the west side of that building in a cut lay, even though they're there as parking, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to park on the street, take them out of the right side and walk them up, because to me, that makes the most sense. Therefore, I'm going to make the motion that we approve the variance applied for the Brian and Kim Swabalski daycare at 702 East Southview Drive.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Russ. Discussion on that motion.
I just want to know I'll be abstaining from this vote because of conflict of interest.
Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. Motion passes. We'll note the abstention from Councilmember Lizinski.
Since the vote's tonight, I'd just like to make one comment. When I was at the League of Minnesota Cities conference, was it 3 weeks ago, Sharon? They said the #1 stop of economic development in rural Minnesota is lack of daycare. So I do appreciate the council supporting this, and I want to commend Brian and Kim for expanding this daycare, because it's been quite a process. It's been a very expensive process. These do not get built cheaply, as we have found out, correct? So, but it's just something to take a note that we need to encourage other daycares, because they said that's the #1 lack of development is lack of daycare.
I guess my comment would be too, that if you do feel this is excess parking, again, it should be taken to the L&O committee and we should change the ordinance.
Totally agree.
And
Yeah, absolutely.
that needs to be done.
And there were some parking adjustments recently done. We ran into it with the big box store, at Walmart's, but they were complaining about our requirements, and it was lowered after that, so maybe we need to look at some of the other.
Sure.
That's all future discussion, but in the meantime, we'll move to agenda item number 18.
Duly noted.
So, agenda item number 18, introduction of the project and project management from MnDOT, the East College Drive. Glenn, do you want to make any
Yes, I'll
comments?
introduce it. Gene will be handing out some information for you. This is Gene East from Department of Transportation. They're starting already on the 2024 reconstruction project on Highway 19, College Drive, from Bruce Street to 4th Street. And they've hired a consultant as well. I'll let him do the introductions of the consultant. And Gene?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Burns, council members. Thanks for your time tonight. The description in the agenda is exactly right. We want to make some early introductions to the project and to the team that we hope you will hear from and be talking with quite a bit in the future. So with that, a little bit about the project. Glenn introduced it well. It is quite a ways out in the future, but it's a really important one. It is Highway 19 through the heart of Marshall from 4th Street to Bruce Street through the downtown. MnDOT has aging, deteriorating pavements in the area. City of Marshall has aging and deteriorating infrastructure and the utilities. Those two together come together at the appropriate time sometimes, and we end up with a major reconstruction. So that's what we're looking for. 2025 is the fiscal year. We're looking at a letting in fall of 2024. And so we are out in advance of that work considerably. We're out front quite a distance, but it's again a major undertaking in this area and in that urban setting like that. So we're here early. Again, my name is Gene East. I'm the project manager. I work out of the District 8 office at Wilmer, and we have SEH on staff right now, and I'm going to use that handout in front of you largely as our guide to the discussion tonight. For the most part, the project being this far out, it is not scoped in MnDOT's vernacular. We don't have a definition of the project very well. We have limits. We have for 4th Street, Bruce Street. We know that it's going to be a major reconstruction based on the fix that's needed for both utilities and the pavements. So, but we are many questions yet to be worked out in terms of what the project will be finally in the construction. So the project benefits noted on there are mostly pretty obvious to you. That a smoother ride for us, of course, is always key. But in this process of a major reconstruction, there's also just by default of the magnitude of the construction, we have opportunities to improve drainage, we have opportunities to improve safety, as well as aesthetic improvements or additions that the city may want to see. So it's our and your opportunity to really make a great project, something really special. So it's again, we're out front quite early, but on the back side of that same handout, I think I'll use this timeline as kind of a further introduction to the project, if you would. And we are largely talking about now this project development phase. Again, as we get into further along through the project, and with the SEH team and MnDOT right now, we're going to work through the project development and the preliminary design under this contract. And you see that's going to wrap up early in 2020, or about in 2021, late 2020, early 2021. So that's the area we're talking about. And we're going to need to see and spend time with this group, both reporting in on our progress, on decisions making, and turning to this group for decisions and input. So under that project development group there, you'll see public engagement. We're going to be talking about intersection options, signals, etc. Streetscape and aesthetic, that's that opportunity for some special items that the city may see as important to the project. Drainage investigation is a key part of this contract work, as well as lane configuration. So the basics of what's it going to be, the very basic parts of that. And then later in this process, later into 2020, we'll be doing what we call preliminary design, again, developing that geometric layout for signature. So with that, I want to keep it very brief and just put this out there that, again, my name's Gene East. I'm the project manager. And on the bottom there, you'll see my name and contact information. But I also want to make sure to introduce Nikki Farrington. Nikki Farrington is SEH project manager for this work. So at this podium in the future, the likelihood that you will see myself or Nikki to bring information to you or ask for input from you it's a good possibility you'll see and hear from us again. I also want to make sure that you're aware that although the MnDOT and SEH are the project lead, you are represented at the table with Jason Anderson. Jason is the city's liaison to the project management team. And so Jason, with Nikki and myself and various MnDOT folks as they rotate through the process, we're the project management team. And so you have my contact information, Nikki's contact information, as well as Jason. And with that, I want to hopefully reserve 5 minutes or less at this time for any questions you might have, or for Nikki, or for Jason, if you so choose.
Thank you, Gene. A very quick question is the intersection at Country Club Drive reconfiguration, perhaps to a roundabout, is that within the scope of this project?
It is. In not only that intersection, every intersection. In fact, one of our most into the weeds discussions today was indeed about each intersection. We are doing an in-depth analysis at 8 different intersections along the corridor, and most everything is on the table. Most everything is on the table for discussion about configuration. So we're assessing all of the safety concerns, all the traffic turning movements, and so forth. So absolutely.
Any other questions?
Gene, were you involved in the Redwood Falls Highway 19 one?
I was not.
Okay, well, it was a nice job. Nice
I'll
job.
pass that
Way to
along.
fix that problem.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. I'll pass that along.
I'm just looking at the map here, and we're doing College Drive, right? Highway 19, College Drive.
Yes.
And it's going from Bruce Street, and it says to 4th Street?
Yes. Armory, southeast, southwest.
Okay.
Yeah. The
Okay,
big
I was looking at the
corridor.
wrong one. I was wondering how it goes to 4th Street. Okay.
Yeah, that's a long corridor. Yeah.
Okay.
Pardon me for the.
Okay, that makes sense.
The assumption. I apologize
Yeah,
for that.
thank you.
Yeah, it is indeed a long corridor. Within that, I'm sure you're aware, we have residential, we have urban commercial, we have park settings, we have a lot of different settings and a lot of different stakeholders, if you will, in the project. So we are going to need to be visiting with you on a regular basis.
Well, thank you. We do look forward to this project.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Gene.
Move then to agenda item number 19. This is the resolution in support of the chloride reduction project and water discharge to the Redwood River. I'll introduce Brad Rose, the General Manager of Marshall Municipal Utilities, who has been lead on this partnership project.
Mayor, council members, and esteemed staff, thank you for having this back on your agenda. We were last here in April, where we had the value of a unanimous vote to move forward. While we moved forward, we took bids July 9th. The bids just came in a little higher than we hoped for. So we're back, as per the resolution you adopted that evening, back before the council and asking for your consideration. The Utility Commission last week voted to award this project with 2 contingencies. One, the council says yes, move forward tonight, and the other, the PSIG grant from the PFA. The agreement itself is now in the hands of the deed commissioner, and it'll be arriving here soon, we're told. So when those 2 contingencies are met, and then and only then would we actually make the official award. But I'm here tonight to answer any questions you might have. In the agenda packet, there is a spreadsheet. Kyle, if you could find scroll, there you go, thank you. That's a little bit hard to read, but I could make it a little easier. Glenn, can you take one and pass it down? Oh, yeah, that works too. The local portion of the project, the bottom line of numbers is the as-bid numbers with the 5% contingency that the PFA requires, the engineering, the inspection, other costs that are like legal and that type of thing, not that there's a lot of that. We aren't bonding for the project, so there's no bond cost. So the total project cost now is at $11,585,492. The construction contract, that's with the 5% contingency. The construction contract prior to the contingency that we would sign with the apparent low bidder, KHC Construction of Marshall, is $9,620,000. The number right below that is just a 5% higher number than that. The next set of column of numbers is the grant that we will be receiving, leaving the local portion. And the bottom 2 lines, you want to think of them as bookends, if you would. If we have no need for any contingency, the number's going to be local portion $4,104,000. If we need the 5% contingency, it's $4,585,000. The MMU portion is the percentage as agreed upon in April. And there's the resulting numbers from MMU. The resulting numbers next to that are for the cities. Again, with the 5%, it's as high as $2,555,953. The city has already paid $712,674 design cost. So the remaining amount the city would owe, the bookends are 1.575 to 1.843. We met with your staff last week, had an in-depth discussion there with them, and together we bring the recommendation to the council tonight to direct the MMU Commission to move forward and award the contract in support of the project that would allow the chloride limitation in the city's wastewater NPDES permit to be met by the year 2024, I think is the year that's required to be met. Right? So to meet that, there's some heavy lifting that has to be done, and this is step one. Without this, that limitation will never be met. So with that, any questions?
Questions for Brad or Scott?
Brad, just a question. Did you have more than one bid, and did
We
you
had
get
two
very
bids.
competitive bids?
We had two bids. The second low bid, Jeff, do you recall, was it about 900,000 higher? Yes. Roughly?
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. This contractor has done a lot of work at this plant, so he's very familiar with the facility. I asked my engineer what appeared to be higher than what you were thinking it was going to be when he gave me his estimate. And his answer to me was the largest discrepancy was on earthwork, concrete, and metals. Now, since we started this project, so many years ago, it's 5 years since we first talked with the council about this project. I think that's 14 was when you got that chloride limitation initially. So the numbers are the oldest numbers are the top line of numbers, the freshest numbers are the bottom two lines. And things have changed over time. And one of the things that have changed is there is now a steel tariff that wasn't there just a few years ago. One of the delays in the project was brought about by the legislature when they established the grant program and they funded it. They funded it from a source that was, at the end of the day, not supportable legally, so they had to go to the next legislative session, do it again and they created a source from their general fund, which is the normal way they do it. So we were fortunate that that happened. We got a lot of support from Bob and others in that regard, and a coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities helped us a great deal. And so we're at a point where we'd like to get this project underway before winter so the foundations can be established and they can hopefully then work throughout the winter. The completion date is roughly March, I think, of 2021. And so, any questions from anyone?
Not really questions, just a comment. You may want to address a little bit more on the contingency. You did have it in the original numbers, but part of the receiving the grant is we had to increase that contingency.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I had been using a 3.6% contingency, and the person at the PFA told me they insist that we use 5% at this juncture in the project.
Brad, can you help me understand why the city's portion is higher than the MMU portion?
Yeah, good question. When we started this conversation, MMU Commission said, why do we do this? We have another project that we need to do to refurnish aging equipment, the lime slaking equipment, to keep us making water at 35 grains, finished water at 35 grains hardness. And that price of doing that at that time was estimated about $900,000. It has since gone up to about 1.6. Then the idea that doing this for the chloride limitation that the city has came about, and we studied together softening it further. So the commission, the utility commission, is looking at this. What would we do if we didn't have a chloride limitation? Versus what are we doing because we have a chloride limitation as a community? And we looked at that, And when the estimate was, in March 26, when the estimate was 10.606, that was the resulting percentage.
I think, Scott, you could also add that there was an evaluation from the wastewater end that there wasn't an economically feasible alternative to.
That is correct. The reverse osmosis is the only way to remove chlorides from wastewater, which is vastly more expensive than this project would be. Plus, you have to deal with the reject, which that gets hard to do.
So the best option was to partner with the utilities, upgrade the plant with the upgrade that would be needed anyway to provide water, and then combine that with the improvement that would reduce the salt in the chlorides.
So for the audience viewing on TV and here, the short answer is because this is a wastewater issue and not a freshwater issue.
Right.
It falls more on the city because citizens are generating the wastewater.
Right.
Perfect. That makes sense. Thank you.
There's two heavy lifts with this project, the capitalization, which we're addressing this evening, and we appreciate your partnership in getting that accomplished. The state and the city have been wonderful to help get this capitalized. The second heavy lift for this is the water rates that are going to result from making a water that is now 6 grains hard using additional chemicals to make that happen. And we're in the middle of a water rate study, but there's going to be quite a rate impact on the cost of water. Offsetting that somewhat will be the reduction in what a homeowner or ion exchange salt softener owner, because some are commercial obviously, they're going to pay less for salt to get that process done. It's not a perfect offset. Overall, it's going to be somewhat of an increase, but the water quality is going to be a lot better.
I was just going to question a point on the change in the cost. We're still under our max in our resolution, correct?
No, that's why we're here this evening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions?
One way or another, citizens are going to pay for this, whether they pay through fees, through usage, or through taxes.
Right.
And the percentages have already been agreed upon as far as how to split it up between the city and MMU. I'm just wondering, sometimes is it easier to swallow as a rate increase in the usage or property taxes? And that's already been decided, but it's one of those things that one way or another they're going to pay for it.
Maybe a different group of people feel the pain,
Yeah.
but it's painful either way.
Right.
Yeah. There is no free lunch. The higher water quality is going to cost more. Fortunately, we have the water to work with, the quantities, but without this project, we're never going to get to 6 grains hardness.
Well, I think also without the $7 million grant, it wouldn't have been feasible.
Yeah, I don't think we would have got out of the starting blocks. There is an interesting aside, if you give me a little bit. 20 years ago, the community of Marshall was contemplating its first water softening plant. Up until that point, we were just doing iron removal with filtration. Jeff and I weren't there working on it, but as we read the history of what went on, 20 years ago, the community entertained going to a softer water and did not do it. They only reduced it to 35 grains hard. During that intervening 20 years till now, the salt from the softeners would be over 51 million pounds of salt. Had we done that back then, let's say half of the salt would have been removed and not put into the Redwood River as part of the total dissolved solids coming from the wastewater effluent. We would have saved 25.5 million pounds of salt not going into the Redwood River. Now we're at that point again as a community, asking ourselves, do we want to make a different kind of water quality as a community? We have the capital raised if the resolution is adopted this evening. We have participation from the state, and it's something that is the only way we can get to the chloride limitation in the effluent.
And there's an added benefit too, just in the infrastructure in our homes, the infrastructure within the community, the the advantage that we get in not putting the additional mineral into our system. And, you know, the whole thing about everybody tells me a water heater only lasts 4 years in Marshall. Well, I must have got the magic water heater then, because I've lived in my house for 27 years and I've only put one in.
Knock wood real quick.
Well,
Yeah.
But
I don't want to do a rate projection, get involved in that study, because I know there's a lot more to it, but, I mean, I kind of just did some calculations on the cost of salt for Marshall residents and what they're paying on a, you know, monthly basis, and it's the initial rate increase that I did see, not saying that's going to be the absolute, you know, it's pretty close, the reduction in salt costs to a potential rate increase. It's not quite even, but it's awfully close. And then, as Councilman Schaefer stated, the equipment, hot water heaters, the softener itself, you have to have a really good softener for harder water, and there'll maybe be some savings there. It won't eliminate the softener potentially. I don't know if you want to address that.
personal preference.
Can we do this again?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you set him up very well.
This is a frequently asked questions, one sheet that we prepared. It's on our website. Obviously, the number is wrong now that the bids are taken, but it gets into some of that about, must I remove my water softening equipment? The answer is no. When we soften down to 6 grains, Jeff wants me to say 6 to 8 grains because there's kind of a range there. I know some water consumers that are going to want to continue to have water at 0 grains or maybe 1 grain because that's what they've been accustomed to. And they may do that. So we're not saying to anybody, you have to take out your water softener. That may be a personal choice by some people, but that's totally a personal choice. All water softeners are going to have to be adjusted. So the incoming water is known how hard it is today, and it's set at that level. When that changes from 35 to 6, let's say, somebody, and I'm suggesting probably the water softener company that you're working with, unless you can figure it out yourself, needs to adjust that water softener, or you won't use any less salt. So that's step 2. After we get the plant built, Jeff gets the adjustments made, and we're now sending that water soft into the community. Step 2 is we have to work with the water consumers, the wastewater users, and incentivize them to take those step measures and get those accomplished.
One last point, Brad, you mentioned the project 20 years ago, and it was fortunate that that project was done because that provides the same kind of basis to build this on, correct?
Right.
And I know of a neighboring, you do too, the regional community that does not have that type of facility, that is dealing with this same dilemma, and their estimated cost is roughly 8 times more than what your bid is here. So.
Yeah. Well, if we had to start from scratch, a new water treatment plant, we might size it a little differently, but it would be a $40 to $50 million investment. Yeah.
Any other questions? If not, you have the resolution before you.
I would make a motion to pass the resolution.
Second.
Motion by John, seconded by Russ. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And a motion does pass.
Thank you.
By the way, hey, Jeff, congratulations on the kudos you got from the Murphy family, and thank you for doing that.
We'll move on then to agenda item number 21. This is a resolution regarding accepting the low quotation and authorizing James Lazinski Construction Incorporated to proceed with the installation of steel to a roof located on a facility at Justice Park. I'm sorry, I did. Thank you for pointing that out. We should do agenda item number 20. This is Project Z70 West Marshall Street West Redwood Street Alley Improvement Project. The action would be to consider the resolution declaring the adequacy of the petition and ordering the preparation of the report. Glenn, any additional comments?
No further comments.
Any questions on this item?
I just have one question, it's just kind of for information. Why do both homeowners have to sign if they're a married couple?
That's because I don't want to get in the middle of a marital fight with one person wants it and the other doesn't. The law requires owners of the property, whether it's trust, whether it's, whatever. And that was my call, I required.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you for that answer. I can appreciate that.
See, now, Jim doesn't have that problem. He always votes the way his wife wants him to.
I'm a smart man doing that.
And I'm glad you did that. And I notice on this one, it does have both husband and wife signing on it. And the only reason I brought the other one up before is in our packet, it just had one signature.
Correct.
So the way it's showing now is, I think you're correct in your analysis. And it's better to be safe than sorry. Yeah, thank you.
So I would entertain a motion on this.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Russ. Discussion? Now we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And that motion passes. Well, no, one abstention. Okay, now we'll do agenda item number 21. This is a resolution regarding the low quotation authorizing James Lazinski Construction to proceed with the installation of the steel roof on the facility located in Justice Park. Sharon, are you doing this, or Dennis, or?
Well, this is a Preston project again. Dennis did prepare and provide leadership on the required conflict of interest forms, so it's in a correct form to take action. But James Lazinski Construction was the low bid for this particular project.
Anything to add, Dennis? Okay.
No, we received the signed affidavit acknowledging the conflict of interest from Mr. Lazinski, so all the preliminary steps are in.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by John.
Second.
Seconded by Steve for the resolution. Discussion on the motion?
I talked to Preston before the meeting regarding this item, and I was just curious as to, he did get quotes from different contractors, and when I looked at the numbers weren't even close. I mean, this was quite a savings for the city by going this way, and so that was my main concern, to see how close the quotes were. And thanks to Preston for providing that information. And we are getting quite a savings by having this contractor do it for us, so.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
And I have one question for the contractor. I mean, in previous discussions, you've indicated that you'll add like 10% to the bid so you can come in cheaper. Did you do that on this one too?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Other discussion on the motion without that being discussed.
One other legal requirement, it does require unanimous approval from the other council members.
No pressure there.
Another 10% off?
I don't own the company. My wife does it. She's sick today, so.
So with that, we'll move to a vote. And we'll close the voting. And it does pass. We'll note one abstention. Okay. So with that, then we'll move to Commission Board Liaison Reports. From my mind, the Highway 23 Coalition has met since we last met. The Southwest Regional Development Commission also had their annual meeting. I was in attendance at both. Given the length of this meeting, I'll give the detail at a future meeting. Greg?
In light of time, I'll do the same. The Merit Commission met last Thursday. I have a fairly extensive summary from Jasmine at our next meeting.
Mine is quick. I was not able to make the EDA because I was at a work commitment in Sioux Falls. The Cable Commission and Community Services Advisory Boards have not met.
Glenn?
Agenda item number 17 was discussed by the Planning Commission, and we acted on that tonight. That's the only item.
And John?
did attend the EDA meeting, and there was significant discussion on the strategic plan and the budgeting that'll be coming before the council here in the near future. Also some discussion regarding incentives for businesses. Again, maybe a point where we say, okay, got enough of them, maybe stop or something like that. But it was just some discussion regarding that. Did attend the MMU utilities meeting. We did act on the salt reduction. We just took that up. It should be noted that the Utilities Commission also voted unanimous for the change and the increase. It would potentially put our $7 million grant in jeopardy. You may have noticed there's actually 7 very large streetlight poles that got put up around the city, and maybe wondering what those are for. That's actually a project funded by Verizon in replacing the streetlight poles so they can put on the equipment in the city. There will be activating a 5G network in the area. They paid for all the expenses of switching out the poles, but they needed, due to the weight of the equipment, they needed a much more rugged pole, and there were 7 of them that were installed around the community. The automatic meter reading is essentially complete, other than a few locations that MMU will be handling themselves. So the company that did the installation has left. They've completed all their work and have left. They're wrapping up some of the testing. They found some areas that they need to make some adjustments on, but that's getting through. And also that, just a little note that the, through MMU, they periodically do a phishing test, what's called a phishing test, sending out emails, things to see if somebody might bite on one, to which would open up a security risk within the system on our servers. And city did have it was about an 8% penetration, so a little bit of training yet to do, but things are actually moving along pretty well on that. Just a little bit of cleanup that everybody needs to watch what they open up for emails, although they may look very good. Just watch where they're coming from, see what they're about before you open up any attachments or anything like that. So just a word of caution on that. And yeah, I think that's about it for now.
Library Board has not met since our last meeting. Police Advisory Board has not met, and Convention Visitor Bureau will meet tomorrow morning.
Transit area met, I was unable to attend, the other 2 have not met.
Okay. We'll move to council member individual items. Craig?
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Steve?
I had a constituent talk to me about water drainage on the Carr estate area. I talked to Glenn and Jason about that, and they're going to look into it.
Glenn?
I have nothing.
Jim?
I had a gentleman approach me about train whistles, but I think something's coming up on that soon. Ironic that I think we discussed someplace we had to discuss, but I know there's a study coming up on that. Other than that, I have nothing.
Russ?
I have nothing.
John?
Just a quick thank you to the firemen for their appreciation dinner the other night. Very nice dinner. I know some of you were not able to attend, but it was a perfect evening out there, and held out in Independence Park, which the kids had a good time to go play. A lot of the equipment out there, and just a very nice evening. So thank you to the firemen.
And now just mention quickly, the Transit hosted a bus rodeo the weekend before last. That was a busy weekend in the community because there's also a sports tournament that was in town, but there was a lot of activity with this statewide bus rodeo. It was well attended from all over the state, and it was local planning committee, led by Kathleen Amick, who really did a nice job in organizing that. With that, we'll move on then to staff reports. Sharon?
Just a brief mention. I know tonight there was a number of statements made regarding the school traffic study. Today, Glenn and Jason and I did attend a meeting on some initial results of their traffic study. This is the first time the city has seen any data or maps or potential solutions to the traffic study. I believe they're going to have a community meeting on this. It's either August 5th or August 8th. I heard both dates mentioned. But once we get a confirmed date, we will share that with council, because I know you have a lot of residents contacting you about what that's going to look like. And we will convey as well that the city would like to give some input. Today wasn't the greatest venue for that because there was a lot of other input that was valuable, but it wasn't from the engineering perspective of our staff. So that's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, well, thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just one item I will be bringing forward to the next meeting. Issues with frost boils from 2019. We probably have 15 to 20 spots around the city that have to be repaired that aren't in the budget. We'll try to bring forward the locations and the potential funding at the next meeting. That's all I have.
Nothing else.
Okay, then we'll move then to the remaining agenda items. They include the information items that you have for your information, the listing of upcoming meetings.
So move.
Brings us to agenda item number 29, motion by Craig to adjourn, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. Motion passed. We are adjourned.